Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
No matter how you look at it, animal agriculture helps Nebraska's economy. The livestock industry provides increased tax revenues for schools and community services. Livestock enterprises also create jobs while contributing to existing businesses such as local banks and grocery stores. A thriving livestock industry helps maintain our current way of life, but also provides opportunities for the next generation of farm families. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff helps to raise awareness of the importance of animal agriculture to Nebraska.
Market Journal, television for making agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension, where you can know how, know now. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Frayne Olson looks at wheat, corn, and soybean markets. Al Dutcher forecasts winter weather conditions for Nebraska. Bruce Johnson describes how the agricultural sector has gained the major property tax load in Nebraska. And Terry Klopfenstein discusses his 48-year career at UNL, including past advances and future challenges in the beef industry. Our market analyst this week is North Dakota State Extension economist Frayne Olson. The latest crop progress report, which is the last for the 2013 growing season, showed U.S. winter wheat in much better shape than a year ago. 63% of the crop is rated in good to excellent condition. That's 30 points higher than at this time in 2012. Frayne joined us Tuesday afternoon to look at wheat, corn, and soybean markets. We started by looking at the current condition of this year's winter wheat crop.
Yeah, we got the last winter wheat condition report for several months now. And in general, the winter wheat crop is in pretty good shape. Much better than we saw last year, but the condition ratings did slip a little bit. Right now, nobody's really concerned about the current condition because it is relatively good. Yeah,
like you mentioned, that we're miles above where it was last year.
Without a doubt. Last year was obviously we went into dormancy with a lot of real concerns about what might happen as we break dormancy next spring. But this year's a much different animal.
All right, so for the production that already took place earlier this year, give me some updates on the export market for wheat.
Yeah, and that's really been where a lot of the activity has been placed. The our typical buyers like the Japans and the Mexicos and the other Pacific Rim countries have actually been very steady in their purchases. The surprise this year has really been the export pace into both China and Brazil, and I know we talked about that briefly last time. The reason for the Chinese purchases was primarily because of some quality issues that they had. They're in the market, world market, for some milling quality wheat. They've got plenty of feed quality wheat. The other major export destination for U.S. wheat has been Brazil, which has also been a surprise. Typically, they buy a lot of their wheat from Argentina, but this year Argentina is having some problems and are really limiting the amount of exports. So the amount of sales that we've made into both the Chinese market as well as the Brazilian market have been a surprise to us. I guess as I look forward, I think the key to the future Chinese purchases, if they continue, will be the potential size and quality of the Australian crop. And Brazil, the expectation right now is that they will continue to buy, but they do have to make some legislative decisions to allow more tariff-free imports, which again the market is currently expecting. I guess the only other thing that I want to comment on, which is pretty important for the wheat market in general, is the typhoon that happened in the Philippines. The Philippines also imports a lot of wheat, primarily from the U.S., both winter wheat and spring wheat. And so the typhoon and some of the damage that was done there may interrupt some of the distribution issues. The expectation right now is that the total quantity of exports probably won't change, but the timing of that may change a little bit. So it is something we'll need to keep an eye on.
Briefly, you mentioned Australia. Just give me an overview of kind of international production.
Right. The two things, just again to update everybody, the Canadian crop was a massive crop. It is now officially the largest on record, or at least within the current records that we have. Very large production. The biggest challenge they've got right now in Canada is logistics. Their logistics system is having a hard time handling not only the high quantity of spring wheat, but also the large canola crop they produced. The other thing that we need to keep probably a closer eye on is the Australian crop. Again, the expectation right now is to have a pretty good sized crop coming out of Australia. But more recently, we've had a lot of rain start to appear in Western Australia, which is raising some concerns about quality and especially milling quality wheat. And then in Eastern Australia, there was some late season frosts. And so there is some frost damage. We know that it's out there, but unfortunately, we don't yet know what the extent of it is. So we'll have to wait to see and listen to some of the early harvest reports. And again, if there's some quality issues there, I do look for some more export sales, especially of milling quality wheat into China. But if they have good export, a good quality coming out of Australia, those export sales may shift into the Australian market instead of the U.S. market.
I want to jump into corn and beans because I want to get your thoughts here as we enter December and then going into 2014 here. We know corn is of abundant supply after this harvest, and we know that soybeans are going to be big down in South America this year. As you look at farmers with corn and beans after this harvest, what do you recommend they take a look at before they decide whether to sell or to hold?
Well, the corn and the soybean market are two actually very different markets in today's world. The corn market, we have ample supplies. The real question the corn market's trying to answer is how low do prices have to go before we start picking up more export sales? And so what I'm really looking for as a trigger for some potential sales would be if we get good export sales, we see a nice rebound in prices, that I would say that as a selling opportunity. Again, I don't expect big rallies to come out of those announcements, but they will be above today's levels, in my opinion. On the soybean side, much different story. Supplies are much tighter. The expectation is for another massive crop coming out of South America. They're just in the process of finishing up their planting season right now. So to be honest, as we move forward, we're going to be in a weather market based on the South American weather forecasts, and there might be some excitement later on.
Next week, Jim Robb from the Livestock Marketing Information Center will be with us, and John Moret from J.E. Moret Grain Company in Brunswick will look at corn and soybean markets leading up to the December crop report. Al Dutcher will give his weekly weather forecast as usual this week, but as we enter December, we thought it'd be a good time to take a quick look at Nebraska's current moisture conditions and glance ahead at what might be in store as we approach winter.
Well, if we want to look at it in regards to how a climatologist would track things in regards to ag weather, we kind of look at that October 1st as the start of the recharge season for soil moisture. And of course we ended the season very dry and very warm, and then we've seen those big storms with the blizzard, unfortunately, that caused significant damage. And then we followed up with a fairly major storm at the beginning of the month of November. When you accumulate all that, we have some significant surpluses that have accumulated across northeast Nebraska and parts of east central Nebraska. We're looking at 2 to upwards of 5 inches above normal for that period. So we're in really good shape in regards to the last couple of years in these locations. The real problem area that hasn't seen the significant moisture has been portions of the southwest, west central, and then of course the western half of southwest Nebraska. And so we seem to continue in this trend, and unfortunately with all this cold air that's been coming in, we're starting to set some frost in the ground. And the big issue at this point is, are we even going to have enough good weather to get a liquid event that can get into the profile before the ground freezes up solid? And that's what we really need to see in southwest Nebraska. That being said, from a perspective, what we've seen the last 3 years, we're in pretty good shape going through the winter. Does that mean that the drought is over, or that the improving conditions will continue? There's a lot of uncertainty, and it really is going to boil down to whether or not we see an aggressive winter pattern. Can we lay a decent foundation of snow? Because even if we freeze the ground and we can get a significant amount of snow accumulation this winter, that a lot of people may not want that, that becomes a runoff component in the spring.
Right.
And that's how we get the hydrological aspect of this drought starting to ease it up.
Let's talk about winter here,
yeah.
Because every time you come in for Thursday, I say it's too cold, and you say get used to it. Give me a brief overview of temp and precip for winter.
Okay, there's really not a lot to be garnered from CPC's forecast for this next 3 months, and that's not unusual. CPC's forecast, winter forecast, or even out through the season, is highly dependent on the equatorial Pacific. Their accuracy goes way up during El Nino and La Nina events. And we're in what we call an ENSO neutral conditions, meaning that there is no significant sign of El Nino or La Nina. Therefore, we become dependent on how the northern jet acts. And the big factor in that will be, Do we see a blocking pattern establish itself in the North Atlantic? If we do, then this cold weather we've been seeing would likely to continue, because when we have that blocking pattern, we tend to see a rather significant troughing action across the eastern United States. That opens the door from Canada to locations to the south. If we see a rotation, meaning that we see that blocking pattern establish, it breaks down after a couple of weeks, then we start to see a trough reform in the western United States, and we get a progressive pattern which would accumulate snowfall. So that's why CPC doesn't really give us an accurate forecast, or I shouldn't say an accurate forecast, a real reliable forecast in terms of a trend. My suspicion is that these cold Arctic waves are going to continue. There has been no sign in the models that they're not going to continue. So we're going to have to deal with periodic cold fronts coming through with very significant air temperatures well below normal. Anytime you do that, you're looking at Arctic fronts with the possibility of light snow. On occasion, we may throw a big snowstorm coming out of the southwest. And so I see this as more of a normal winter at this point, with the possibility that it could be exceptionally cold the first half of the winter. And then we'll just have to pay attention to see how much snow we accumulate on the ground, because that'll dictate our temperature the second half of the winter.
We'll have a closer look at the upcoming forecast when Al returns towards the end of the show. The USDA expects net farm income for 2013 to be up 15% from last year. When adjusted for inflation, the estimate of $131 billion would be the highest net farm income since 1973. The gain is not from crops, which the agency says won't all be sold in 2013, but from livestock. The USDA projects livestock receipts to increase by nearly 6%. Expenses for 2013 overall forecast at $352 billion, or an increase of nearly $11 billion from last year. The state of Nebraska has 93 counties. In 66 of them, the agricultural land base represents at least half of the assessed property value. Of the state's increase in total valuation from 2012 to 2013, ag land accounted for 87% of the growth. In a recent Cornhusker Economics article, UNL professor of ag economics Bruce Johnson explained how the agricultural sector has become the heavy lifter when it comes to rural economies and government services. We talked with Bruce earlier this week and started by asking for a historical perspective on ag land versus non-ag land when it comes to valuation in Nebraska.
Well, again, we come back to what the assessed value is to assign a property tax. And the various classes of real estate across the state is ag land is one, and commercial and industrial is another, and residential recreation is a third. Those are the three main components. And over time, what we see is quite a change in terms of that proportion of ag land as a percent of the total assessed value across the state.
Increasing, you mean?
Very much, significant increase.
You go back to, obviously Nebraska weathered the recession very well. A lot of it was because of agriculture. But your study, based off of kind of 2008, was a shifting point or a major fueling point where residential prices didn't do as great, commercial prices maybe didn't do as good, but ag prices, obviously because of high commodity prices, that's when that really started to increase further, right?
Absolutely. And so, 2008, and ag's increase of the total increase in assessed value in the state was about 50%. And yet that has continued to go up. In fact, last year, the ag land portion of total assessed value in the state was 87% of that total. So that really creates a shift in relative significance
of the total pie. So of all of it, what portion does agriculture make up?
The ag land portion represents a third of our total assessed value in the state, and a decade ago that was 22%. So there's a quantum jump.
Okay, so the takeaway here is that there's a burden on ag, right?
Quite appropriately so, because as you take it back to the county level where the taxation takes place for county and local services, we have the bulk of our counties, ag land represents at least 50% or more. And in some 40 counties, it's 2/3 or more of the total assessed value. And that responsibility falling on ag land has just continued to grow.
And those counties are getting a lot of their money from ag. Does that take away any money from other areas that they could get money from?
Well, again, it's how much we assign for local services to a property tax base. And yeah, I think it creates some difficulties in terms of this economic balance. Surely ag is the driver, the main force behind our rural economies. And increasingly so, it has been a heavy lifter. It's getting to be even a heavier lifter of local government services.
The Nebraska Legislature's Tax Modernization Committee has held a series of meetings kind of through September, October. And what are some of the things that could come away here that could help property taxes? If they decide to do that, that's unsure yet. But what are some of the things that could be seen here?
Well, presently we assess ag land at 75% of market value. That's a kind of constitutional provision that's been in place for a good many years. As we look at the total picture of balance and fairness and appropriate tax consideration, we'd really, I believe, need to consider this heavier burden, increasingly heavier burden on the ag component. And so if we took that 75% of market value provision down to, say, 60%, as some entities, groups are suggesting, that would at least be some degree of rebalancing in a more fair and equitable way.
We'll link to Bruce's recent Cornhusker Economics article regarding this topic on our website if you're interested in more information. The latest state and national job numbers show Nebraska continues to stand among the lowest for unemployment. Nebraska's preliminary estimate for October unemployment is 3.9%, down 0.2 of a point from September. The October 2013 figure matches that of October 2012. Meanwhile, the national unemployment rate increased 0.1 of a point to 7.3%. By state, Nebraska has the third lowest rate. North Dakota ranks first, South Dakota ranks second. Throughout a 48-year career at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Terry Klopfenstein has made a deep impact on the beef industry. That's apparent from his numerous awards, recently being named one of Beef Magazine's 50 most influential industry leaders in the last 50 years. Now in an emeritus role with UNL, Terry came to Lincoln in 1965 after graduating from The Ohio State University. That's his, the, not mine. While his postdoctoral work focused on alfalfa stems in the then prominent dehy production industry, Terry worked significantly in beef cattle nutrition involving distillers' grains. Beef Magazine described him as the first to develop beef cattle diets using distillers' grains as both a protein and energy source. At a recent nutrition conference at the ARDC near Meade, we sat down with Terry to talk about the challenges and opportunities in the beef industry, as well as the advances he's seen over his 48-year UNL career.
There would be a number. Certainly the biggest, though, is the ethanol industry and the impact that that's had. We've had lots of efficiencies. A lot of those are what I would call technology. Greater use of implants, the beta agonists that are being debated right now with challenges, but they've added a lot of efficiency. Ionophores, rumensin is one of those that is widely used that increases efficiency. So all of that adds up to quite a bit. I think I hope we've become a little better at diet formulation and doing that. But all of those things are still relatively small compared to the impact that the ethanol industry had, and then the byproduct use by cattle in the state.
Speaking of, you moderated a nutrition panel this morning with 4 guests. 3 of them mentioned distillers' grains, and the other one mentioned livestock grazing corn stalks. Right now, how important is the crop industry to the beef industry?
We've talked before about the golden triangle, the corn production industry, the ethanol industry, and the cattle industry. And it really goes well together. That corn residue is absolutely critical. And we've got a good baseline research, and then with the future, there are all kinds of things that can be done to take advantage of that. And then the ethanol industry fits with that. It caused the corn production to go up, so we've got more residue, but also that byproduct just fits great with these corn residues. So a tremendous opportunity for us in the future.
When we talked about a year ago, we were talking about grazing corn stalks and how you might see a subsequent yield boost on your fields. And you said at the time you were on a mission to promote it and to make people aware of it. Do you think there is a good awareness of that now, or do you think more can be done to make crop producers aware of it?
We've got a long ways to go. There's still resistance. And again, I think we've got the information, although I understand that at times there can be criticism. We've got good information at a couple of sites in the state, greatly different soil types and environments, but and it needs to be long-term. We got one long-term site. Our site out at Brule is at 4 or 5 years is still relatively short-term, but we've got a ways to go. I'm trying to pass that mission on to some younger people, but I think it's being discussed today at an extension meeting, for example, the extension specialists. So we've been working on it, but a lot needs to be done to form this partnership. And one of the things that will help this along, the corn farmers listening aren't going to like this, but one of the things that will help that is $4 corn. Because now $10 an acre for grazing the stalks is different than it was when we were talking $7.50 corn. It adds to the revenue. And we believe that it ultimately helps because of the amount of residue that we have on the field. Removing some is obviously a benefit.
I'll close with one of the questions that was also asked in the earlier panel. What do you see for the future? What do you see as some of the challenges, whether it be in nutrition or animal welfare for the beef industry?
You mentioned animal welfare. That's going to be an issue. We had a good speaker today to discuss that. I don't want to say nutrition's more important just because that's what I do, but I see some of the things on the nutrition side. There's some oil being removed from the distiller's grains. We're talking about other things that can be taken out of the distiller's grains. It's going to be different for us in the future. So we've got to be prepared for that as a cattle industry, both at the feedlot level and at the cow-calf and backgrounding levels. And then I think the greatest potential we have, though, is the use of the residues. Just unlimited because of the number of corn acres and the ability of the ruminant to use it, and limited only by our ability to make good decisions and figure out how to do things well.
That was only a portion of our interview with Terry. Our full discussion is online at marketjournal.unl.edu. We'll have more from the Nutrition Conference in following shows, including a discussion on measuring animal welfare. Conservation agencies at both the state and local levels are zeroing in on the concept of healthy soils. In fact, as you'll find out in the December Nebraska Farmer, the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service has launched a national soil health campaign called Unlocking the Secrets of the Soil. NRCS specialist Ron Nichols recently told Nebraska Natural Resource District board members that adopting soil health practices on the farm is necessary to maintain production on existing croplands. Soil health practices include no-till, cover crops, and proper crop rotations. You can read more about these in the December Nebraska Farmer. Now, with his first weather forecast for the month of December, here's UNL Extension State Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here again for our weekly forecast. I hope that you had a relaxing and pleasant Thanksgiving. As we go through this next week, we'll be paying attention to a storm system that will be moving into the Central Plains as we get into the midweek period. We've had a pretty good stretch of dry weather with some cold conditions earlier in the week, and then we've seen this moderation, and we will continue to see the moderation in temperatures as we move through the next couple days before the bottom falls out in regards to temperatures and we increase our chance for snowfall. So let's take a look at the upper models and see what we can expect. And for today, what we'll notice is that we have a slight northwest flow, but at the surface we're going to have downsloping winds, and that's going to be some fairly mild temperatures, not looking at any precipitation today. And as we move into tomorrow, we'll see that the cold air sags a little bit, so we'll see a couple degree cooling across northern Nebraska, pretty much steady in southern Nebraska, But again, all the activity stays in either south or well to our north of us, and not expecting anything but a few passing clouds. As we go into Monday, we're going to start to see a trough moving into the Pacific Northwest, and that's going to start to push some warm air into the region. Easily could be into the 50s across southwest and possibly the Panhandle, with temperatures well into the 40s across eastern Nebraska. And then as we get into Tuesday, we start to see this trough digging toward the southwest. That's going to start bringing a cold front very close to northwestern Nebraska, and it's very possible that we could see some light snow breaking out very late in the day, and probably see temperatures consistently dropping as we progress through the day on Wednesday. As this trough digs even deeper, the cold, shallow Arctic air will start to move in, and we'll see an increasing cloudiness across the state, with precipitation trying to build in as the day progresses. And as we get into Thursday, this trough digs down south. We do see the energy ejecting out from the southwest, and there is a chance, continued chance of snowfall across the state, with maybe even some icing conditions developing across southeast Nebraska. By the time we get to Friday, this trough hangs around, so we're going to continue to see that chance of light snow continuing and very cold temperatures. So we take a look at the forecast temperatures, we'll notice that we'll see a nice rebound in temperatures early in the week. And then as the system starts to move its way toward Nebraska, we're going to see conditions deteriorate rather rapidly, with a chance of ice snow for Wednesday through Friday. The 8 to 14-day forecast indicates from next Thursday to the following Tuesday that we will continue to see that Arctic plunge into our region, with the opportunity for some snowfall across western Nebraska.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews with Frayne Olson, Bruce Johnson, Terry Klopfenstein, and Al Dutcher are available individually on the Market Journal website and mobile app as part of the November 29th episode. Next week, we'll report from the Range Beef Cow Symposium in Rapid City, South Dakota. We'll look at important topics in the cow-calf sector, and Jim Robb from the Livestock Marketing Information Center will join us to look at cattle markets. John Moret from J.E. Moret Grain Company in Brunswick will also be with us to analyze corn and soybean markets leading up to the December crop report. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension, where you can know how, know now. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Animal agriculture is vital to Nebraska. Livestock production not only contributes to our food supply, but also helps our rural communities. Livestock provides revenue for schools, creates jobs, supports Main Street, and enhances the future for farm families. The Nebraska Soybean Board's Animal Agriculture Initiative works to encourage growth of responsible livestock enterprises to benefit agriculture and Nebraska.